We're not talking about the fun spanking, though, unfortunately. We are talking about the unfortunate reality that a large percentage of American children are still spanked as a form of punishment, corporal punishment, it's often called. Some estimates conclude that up to 80% of American kids have been spanked by the time they reach the 5th grade. I read another number that was the same 80%, but it said by the time they reached the 3rd grade. So regardless, this is still a common enough practice. Now, I think a lot of people think of it as like, oh, spanking's kind of bad, but then it's like, that's it. They're either like, spanking's bad, but like, it's just like some parents, that's just the way they see fit. Oh, well, kind of thing. Like, I think a lot of people are sort of nonchalant about it, but it's time to not be, because spanking is actually incredibly detrimental for your children. Spanking is incredibly harmful, and you'll see this kind of a meme go around, but it's worth bringing up because it's very relevant here, which is simply, is your child old enough to be reasoned with? If the answer is no, then striking them as a form of punishment is bizarre. And if the answer is yes, then why aren't you reasoning with them? And why are you instead going back to monk and striking them? If you can reason with them, then reason with them. It's funny because it's mostly the conservative, Christian, right-wing side of things that are very, very still in favor of spanking, that are very much like, well, back in my days, these lazy darn kids would have gotten their ass beat. And it's like, okay, maybe. I know you say that, but it's bad still, okay? So why is spanking bad? Well, one, it doesn't actually stop the bad behavior. That's the first problem. The whole reason you would spank a child, hypothetically, would be because they did something wrong, and it's a behavior you do not wish for them to repeat. However, spanking doesn't actually deter the bad behavior. Instead, it only increases the child being sneaky and the child hiding their bad behavior from the authority figure who gives them the spanking. That's all it does. So the parent who's spanking their kid, maybe they think the spanking's working because, well, suddenly their kid isn't doing this bad thing in front of them anymore, but they're still doing it. Now it's just behind the scenes. Instead, it actually encourages rebellious behavior. So this comes from Very Well Family. Physical punishment does not improve behavior, study finds. This was posted on July 22nd, 2021. Rather than improving behavior, physical punishment such as spanking can actually increase misbehavior over time. This misbehavior can include things like aggression, intentional harm to someone, defiant behavior, and antisocial behavior such as destruction of property, lying, and stealing. Punishments increase avoidance behaviors, meaning that the person being punished will avoid the person who punishes them and will do whatever they can to not get caught and avoid the punishment. Short-term behavior also worsens, but it might not be visible to whoever provided the spanking. Of the 69 studies reviewed, none of them showed improvements in a child's behavior, attention, intelligence, relationships, social behaviors, or stress response. This means that despite claims that physical punishment is effective or that it can improve a child's behavior, the research does not support this claim. The actual initial goal of the spanking is to deter the bad behavior, but that doesn't actually work. It's not actually teaching them, this is bad, this is why it's bad, here's why you shouldn't do it. All you're teaching them is, if I catch you doing this, there will be pain, so don't let me catch you doing this. That's the first problem. The second problem, of course, is that it is just overall harmful. It sets your child up for more difficulties in their future. Research over the last 20 years has demonstrated that spanking increases aggression in young children and is ineffective in changing their undesirable behavior. Studies have also linked spanking to an increased risk of mental health disorders and impaired brain development. This comes from Cleveland Clinic Health Essentials, posted on January 27th, 2022. The AAP, which is the, American Association of Pediatrics, is an influential professional association that represents some 67,000 pediatricians across the country. Fewer parents raising children today seem to support spanking. Good. While spanking may create a sense of fear in your child in the moment, it won't improve behavior over the long term. In fact, regular spanking normalizes the act of hitting and can lead to aggressive behavior that encourages continued conflict between you and your child. So that's another one. There are some other arguments, though, that people might make. Some critics might pop up now, okay? And they might say something like, well, hold on a minute. What if spanking is not correlated with an increased bad behavior, but what if instead kids who are not behaving are getting spanked more often? That based on this study, it says, our findings that spanking is linked with more problem behavior cannot prove that spanking causes the problem. Again, a causal link would be incredibly difficult to establish here. It could well be that children with more problems elicit more spankings from their parents. However, results from other long-term studies also indicate that spanking predicts a worsening of child behaviors over time, regardless of how problematic they are to start with. So even if they are starting off worse behaved, so they're getting more spankings, that still predicts a worsening of behavior down the line. For example, researcher Lisa Berlin from the University of Maryland and her colleagues found that the more 1-year-olds were spanked, the more aggression they showed 1 year later, and the lower cognitive ability they showed 2 years later. So it just seems that that's not a very good, that doesn't really seem to hold up. The other argument you might hear, which is, well, hold on. If you're talking about spanking your kid as in like, dad comes home drunk and takes his belt off and starts just beating the shit out of the kid, yeah, that's probably going to lead to a lot of negative outcomes. But like, what if we're talking about like a good Christian home where it's a loving house, you're spanked, but it's done in a loving way. There's like this sort of gentle tone to it. You're told that your parents tell you they love you before and after. It hurts me more that I'm doing this than it hurts you, that kind of thing. Maybe that doesn't actually lead to negative outcomes, right? Because in that case, you still have a loving household. Also not true. American Psychological Association, does warmth, so does more gentle parenting overall, moderate the long-term associations between maternal spanking, so in this case it's moms spanking their kids, and child aggression in early childhood. Results indicated that maternal spanking at age 1 was associated with higher levels of child aggression at age 3. Similarly, maternal spanking at age 3 predicted increases in child aggression by age 5. Maternal warmth when children were 3 years old did not predict changes in child aggression between 3 and 5 years old. Furthermore, maternal warmth did not moderate the association between spanking and increased child aggression over time. Beginning as early as age 1, maternal spanking is predictive of child behavior problems, and maternal warmth does not counteract the negative consequences of the use of spanking. American Psychological Association, 2016. This is another really good article to take a look at from Scientific American. What science says and doesn't about spanking. Are kids being spanked for acting out or acting out because they're spanked? So basically, this asks the same type of question, right? They took into account the different variables that could be contributing to the negative outcomes that were found for kids that were spanked. So the meta-analysis was not simply an attempt to synthesize studies. They also wanted to address two concerns often raised about the body of research linking spanking to childhood problems. The first is that much of it has evaluated the effect of physical punishment in general, without homing in on the effects of spanking specifically, and because physical punishment can include tactics such as hitting with objects, pinching, and biting. This, quote, lumping problem may ultimately exaggerate spanking's risks. So this is one of the concerns that will be brought up, the lumping problem. The second concern is that many of the published studies are, quote, cross-sectional, which means that they evaluate the effects of spanking by collecting data at a single point in time, making determinations of cause and effect difficult. So, to address this, they did several things. First, they limited their meta-analysis to studies that evaluated the effects of spanking, slapping, and hitting children without the use of objects, and found that spanking is still associated with negative outcomes. They also compared the results from cross-sectional studies with results from longitudinal studies, which track the kids' behavior over time and are better able to tease out cause and effect. They found that spanking is associated with negative outcomes in both types of studies, which strengthens the argument that spanking poses risks. Now, this goes into how some researchers remain skeptical. It might be hard to, again, control and isolate just spanking kind of thing, but we have isolated it enough so, and we have tracked the outcomes of kids who were spanked in different variations for long enough that it seems pretty obvious that spanking is at least partially linked to negative outcomes for children. And this is only the tip of the iceberg, my friend. It's about to get a hell of a lot a hell of a lot creepier here. The other thing is that this study found that the corporal punishment, the action of corporal punishment, results in an elevated neural response in children that's similar to the neural response that a child might have to even more severe forms of abuse, like sexual abuse. These findings suggest that spanking may alter neural responses to environmental threats in a manner similar to more severe forms of maltreatment. This could be another reason why spanking is correlated with an increased risk of anxiety. So don't tell me like, well, I'm not beating the shit out of my kid. Your kid might consciously know that, but the way that their brain is responding to this is the same way that their brain would be responding to far more severe forms of abuse. So just think about if you want to put your child through that, and if you want to make your child have that kind of a severe neural response, because what? They forgot to pick up their dirty laundry one day. So why don't you put that in your pipe and smoke it, Grandpa? That's only the first part of it, ladies and gentlemen. I see people in chat already saying this got dark. Well, it's about to get a hell of a lot darker, because not only does spanking not deter the bad behavior, not only does spanking lead to a increased risk of aggression, depression, anxiety, mental health disorders, spousal abuse, child abuse. Not only does spanking now show that, and also we've now established that when you spank a child, their neural response to that is the same as their neural response would be to something far more severe, like sexual abuse. Not only do we have all of this, which, let's be real, should be enough to raise instant red flags. If you're currently a parent spanking your kid, and then you've watched this, you've gotten this far in the video, and you're still saying, nah, the good old Bible says to beat the fuck out of my kids, so I'm gonna stick with it. Listen, I get it if you're led astray, if you've been deceived, if you were spanked as a kid and you felt like it worked for you, so that's just how you kind of are raising your kids. You don't really think about it. I get it, okay? But if you have now seen the evidence demonstrating the risks and the harm that spanking poses for kids, but you still continue to do it, you are a deranged subhuman freak. And you honestly deserve CPS to take your kids away, and then you should be shipped off to a zoo where people can look at the crazy freak animal who is able to process information but doesn't know how to act on it because their good Lord Bible said that it's actually better to hit your children. If that's you right now, then fuck you. But maybe this is still not enough, you know? Maybe it's got to get even more dark. Well, we're going to go there. Long-term issues also arise from spanking, particularly issues involving sexual behavior. One study found that spanking raises the chances of risky and deviant sexual behavior. They found that spanking and other corporal punishment is associated with an increased probability of verbally and physically coercing a dating partner to have sex, risky sex, such as premarital sex without using a condom, and masochistic sex, such as spanking during sex. So hold up. Now you're telling me that there's a higher correlation with people who were spanked as kids and then sexualizing spanking as an adult. That's pretty creepy. I wonder why that could be. I wonder if it has anything to do with this incredibly dark fact, which again should be the last and final nail in the coffin for anybody who still thinks that spanking is acceptable. Nerve tracts that pass through the lower spine, okay, carry sensory information to and from both the butt and genitals. Some scientists speculate that these nerves can stimulate one region when the other is provoked. There's also a blood vessel in the pelvic region. When blood rushes to a child's butt because you're spanking them, blood rushes down that artery, but the artery splits. Some of it directs blood to the genitals. So when you cause blood to rush to a child's butt, you're also causing it to rush to his or her other sex organs. The other time this kind of genital blood engorgement happens is during sexual arousal. Yeah, why don't you think long and hard on that one, mommy and daddy? Why don't you sit down on a stump and have a good little think? So this is an interesting article. This comes from Slate. I know, not a great reputation. It says spanking is great for sex, which is why it's grotesque for parenting. And it talks about how it actually has some really interesting details in it, even just about how spanking has been seen as a sex act throughout history. Now comes the question, which is inevitably going to pop up here, or now maybe even the criticism that will inevitably pop up here is, timeouts don't work any better, do they? Ha! So sometimes you just have to resort to taking a good old-fashioned stick and beating the fuck out of your child until they are nearing unconsciousness. Now, the first thing I would say is, how the fuck did this victim of incest learn to speak? The second thing I would say is, shut the fuck up because you are incredibly wrong. There has been decades of research conducted which shows that when timeouts are done correctly, they do actually they are associated with a reduction in aggressive behavior, improved child compliance, and increased generalization of appropriate behavior across environments. This is the Indiana University School of Medicine, Assistant Professor of Clinical Pediatrics, Department of Pediatrics, Division of Child Development. Best practice timeouts include, so these are the way in which you conduct a timeout to make it be actually effective. So again, a timeout is not, I'm going to go lock you in your closet for an hour, Timmy. No. So first we need to be clear about what the term timeout means. A well-implemented timeout occurs in the context of a warm and supportive parenting relationship that includes a high level of positive parental attention, including specific or labeled praises for appropriate child behavior. Across the existing timeout literature, 86% of studies utilized positive reinforcement strategies like these in conjunction with the timeout process. So rather than cracking down and making them fear being discovered doing something bad, instead, make them realize how good it is to do something good. It's not harmful, but it's uncomfortable and makes you stop and snap out of it. No, it is harmful and it's uncomfortable, even if it makes you snap and stop or stop and snap out of it for a moment. It's not going to actually deter that long-term behavior any more than if you took your kid and slapped them in the face. It would probably stun them for a minute and snap them out of it if they're throwing a tantrum or something. That doesn't mean it's actually a good thing to do, or that it's not harmful. I don't think that spanking or corporal punishment is really ever effective. It's really also lazy parenting. If you feel that you need to just slap your kid like a fucking drunk caveman, instead of just utilizing actually proven effective parenting methods that takes a little bit more effort, like cultivating a positive household, making sure that you have a healthy relationship with your child, and then dealing with timeouts where you need to make sure they stay in timeout, where you need to make sure that you're being clear why they are in that timeout, while you need to make sure to reestablish the positive and chill, affectionate relationship after they're done getting in trouble. That takes a lot more work. It's a lot easier to just take your belt off, give them a fucking lashing like they're Jesus Christ, and then go back to work. But if you do that, you're a piece of shit, lazy parent. And you're also just a bad person. I actually think you're a bad person. I will caveat that with, if you have been led astray or deceived, if you're maybe like a young parent and you're ignorant and you've been taught maybe by religious people who are bad, but you're not, I don't know, like I get it, okay? I'm not saying every person who spanks is like an evil person, but I do think that if you are hip to the information surrounding this subject, but you continue to spank your child, I think you are a very bad person. And whether you're doing it on the basis of religion or not, I hope to God there's a hell, and I hope to God that you are going there. Because if you're able to look at this information and read about all the harms that this form of discipline results in, and you continue partaking in the behavior, now I know that you don't actually care about doing what's right for the child. You care about taking the lazy way out, again, because you are a subhuman piece of shit. Long story short, stop spanking.